Lying dead on the first floor landing of some model dwellings known as George Yard Buildings, Commercial Street, Spitalfields. When found, the woman presented a shocking appearance, there being 39 stab wounds on the body, some of them apparently having been inflicted with a bayonet. Alfred George Crowe, cab driver, 35, George Yard Buildings, deposed that he got home at 3:30 on Tuesday morning. As he was passing the first floor landing, he saw a body lying on the ground. He took no notice, as he was accustomed to seeing people lying about there. He did not then know whether the person was alive or dead. He got up at 9:30, and when he went down the staircase, the body was not there. Witness heard no noise while he was in bed. Police Constable Thomas Barrett, 226H, said that the last witness called his attention to the body of the deceased. He sent for a doctor who pronounced life extinct. Dr. T.R. Killeen, of 68 Brick Lane, said that he was called to the deceased and found her dead. She had 39 stabs on the body, stab wounds. She had been dead some 3 hours. Her age was about 36, and the body was very well nourished. Witness had since made a post-mortem examination of body. The left lung was penetrated in 5 places, and the right lung in 2. The heart was penetrated in 1 place, and that would be sufficient to cause death. The liver was penetrated in 5 places, the spleen in 2, and the stomach was penetrated in 6. The witness did not think all the wounds were inflicted with the same instrument. The wounds generally might have been inflicted by a knife, but such an instrument would not have inflicted one of the wounds, which went through the chest bone. His opinion was that one of the wounds was inflicted by some kind of dagger, and that all of them were caused during life. Henry Samuel Tabram, 6 River Terrace, East Greenwich, husband of the deceased woman, said he last saw her alive about 18 months ago in the Whitechapel Road. They had been separated for 13 years, owing to her drinking habits. She obtained a warrant against him. For some part of the time, witness allowed her 12 shillings a week, but in consequence of her annoyance, he stopped this allowance 10 years ago, since which time he had made it half a crown a week, as he found she was living with a man. Henry Turner, a carpenter, staying at the working men's home, Commercial Street, Spitalfields, stated that he'd been living with the woman Tabram as his wife for about 9 years. Reading. 2 or 3 weeks previously to this occurrence, he ceased to do so. He had left her on 2 or 3 occasions in consequence of her drinking habits, but they had come together again. He last saw her alive on Saturday, the 4th inst. In Leadenhall Street. He then gave her 1 shilling 6pence to get some stock. When she had money, she spent it in drink. While living with witness, the deceased's usual time for coming home was around 11 o'clock. As far as he knew, she had no regular companions, and he did not know that she walked the streets. As a rule, he said, a man of sober habits, and when the deceased was sober, they usually got on well together. Mrs. Mary Bosefield, wife of a woodcutter residing at 4 Star Place, Commercial Road, knew the deceased by the name of Turner. She was formerly a lodger, so connected to Henry. She was formerly a lodger in her house with the man Turner. Deceased would rather have a glass of ale than a cup of tea, but she was not a woman who got continually drunk, and she never brought home any companions with her. She left home without giving notice and owed 2 weeks' rent. Mary Ann Connolly, Pearly Poll, who, at the suggestion of Inspector Reed, was cautioned in the usual manner before being sworn, stated she had been, for the last 2 nights, living at a lodging house in Dorset Street, Spitalfields. Witness was a single woman. She had known the woman Tabram for about 4 or 5 months. She knew her by the name of Emma. She last saw her alive on Bank Holiday night, when Witness was with her about 3/4 of an hour, and they separated at 11:45. Witness was with Tabram and 2 soldiers, 1 private, 1 corporal. She did not know what regiment they belonged to, but they had white bands around their caps. After they separated, Tabram went away with the private, and Witness accompanied the corporal up Angel Alley. There was no quarrelling between any of them. Witness had been to the barracks to identify the soldiers, and the 2 men she picked out were, to the best of her belief, the men she and Tabram were with. The men at the Wellington barracks were paraded before Witness. One of the men picked out by Witness turned out not to be a corporal, but he had stripes on his arm. Detective Inspector Reed made a statement of the efforts made by the police to discover the perpetrator of the murder. Several persons had stated they saw the deceased woman on the previous Sunday with a corporal, but when all the corporals and privates at the Tower and Wellington barracks were paraded before them, they failed to identify the man. The military authorities afforded every facility to the police. Pearly Poll picked out 2 men belonging to the Coldstream Guards at the Wellington barracks. One of those men had 3 good conduct stripes, and he was proved beyond doubt to have been with his wife from 8 o'clock on the Monday night until 6 o'clock the following morning. The other man was also proved to have been in barracks at 5 minutes past 10 on bank holiday night. The police would be pleased if anyone would give them information of having seen anyone with the deceased on the night of the bank holiday. The coroner, in summing up, said that the crime was one of the most brutal that had occurred for some years. For a poor defenceless woman to be outraged and stabbed in the manner which this woman had been was almost beyond belief. They could only come to one conclusion, and that was that the deceased was brutally and cruelly murdered. The jury returned a verdict of willful murder against some person, or by some person or persons unknown.
The information excludes the murder of the first woman, Miss Smith. Jack the Ripper can't be the author of that crime. On the other hand, there are enough similarities to suggest he may be the killer of Martha Tabram. I must go to the pet shop.
Of course! It makes perfect sense! To the pet shop!
I must go to the pet shop.
To the pet shop! I don't know why we've come to the pet shop.
I must go to the pet shop.
To the pet shop!
Closed until further notice. Abraham isn't there. No luck.
Oh, hello. Oh, I thought he was coming to talk to me.
Beep beep.
Yay!
Good evening.
Oh, good evening, sir.
Why is the pet shop closed?
Do you know why Mr. Solomonovich's shop is closed?
Which one?
No, I don't. Perhaps his cousin, the cobbler, knows. But I believe the police came to take his animals. I think that might have something to do with it.
When was this?
During the day. The kids you were with the other day were there, they told me. They just came by to ask for some cat's meat. They didn't have any money, but I gave them some anyway. Ah,
Is something wrong?
Is something wrong?
it's just that there was a little girl with them, the same age as mine. My little girl who went away with her mother, with the angels into the sky.
Dr. Watson told me about your loss. Please accept my condolences. Would you like to talk about it? How did it happen?
The illness, sir. My poor little girl was in agony, and her face and body were ravaged by the disease.
Her face?
Yes, she looked like a ghost.
What illness was this?
What illness was it?
Dr. Gibbons tried to explain when I took my little girl to see him, but I didn't understand. I am sure that he was trying to insinuate it was my fault. I'm sorry, but I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I understand. Farewell. Let's go and see Dr. Gibbons.
Oh, right, okay. I thought we were going to go and talk to... What was it? Is it Isaac Solomonovich? Okay, gonna go and do something different.
Hello, Doctor. Do you remember me? I'm Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson's friend.
Oh, yes. Excuse the mess, but I am doing a bit of tidying.
Tell me about Hardiman.
I have come to see you about a Mr. Hardiman, a cat food seller by trade who recently lost his daughter and wife.
Yes, I know him. A tragic story.
Tell me of the disease.
Actually, I was hoping you could tell me about the disease that took his daughter, a disease that would have attacked her face.
Well, to keep it short, we are speaking of syphilis, Mr. Holmes. You must certainly know that it is transmitted through intimate connections and that the vast prostitute population here contributes to its inevitable progression. It destroys individuals by spreading through the body slowly. The most obvious symptoms can be found in the genitalia and on the face in the form of pustules or lesions. Sometimes this illness can destroy whole families. The father catches it from a prostitute, he transmits it to his wife, who in her turn passes it to the kids which she bears or nurses. These cases are numerous in the vicinity. Certain children, and this is the case of the little girl whom I won't name, suffer from an emaciation of the face which will, apart from predicting an imminent death, bring infamy upon the family.
So, emaciation of the face.
Emaciation of the face?
Yes, what we sometimes call the pox. I will give you a photograph. One cannot be mistaken on the origin of such a face. The eyes seem to be void of lids. The nose is inexistent, as if it was cut off. And the cheeks are chiselled, as if cut with a knife. This loss of facial matter, this emaciation, is, in this area, often the gift from a father to his children.
Can I keep this photograph?
I should destroy it. But If it can remind you that one must sometimes think twice before giving in to physical attraction.
I always seem to find myself alone in such cases. Thank you, Doctor.
But of course, that's going to be a reference to the last body we found, isn't it?
Let's go to the cobbler's.
Couldn't we just done that? Yeah. To the cobblers. Here we are. Let's ask him then.
Hello, Mr. Solomonovich.
Ah, Mr. Holmes, how are things with you?
What has happened to
I
Abraham?
heard your cousin Abraham had a problem with his shop. What happened?
Ah, if I didn't know you well, I would tell you that it's Jewish business that doesn't concern anyone but the Jews. But as you have a little bit to do with it, you have the right to know what is going on.
Ah, would I have something to do with it?
Someone had seen Abraham telling you something and making big gestures near the Imperial Club. A vicious rumor quickly spread, and it has caused him great injustice. A slanderous denunciation attracted the authorities' attention to my cousin's shop. Abraham must be in the process of answering their questions.
I did, indeed, speak with your cousin the other night. I'm shocked at the consequences of this discussion.
As I was saying, it's the story of the Jews. In the face of adversity, we are united, but amongst ourselves, it's like anywhere else. As soon as our people take a dislike to someone, for right or wrong, we can be without pity and quite cruel.
Tell me about the Aldgate butcher.
This is all very worrying. Your cousin knows one, or rather two, of the men who were at the Imperial Club on the night of the Mitre Square murder. One of the two, a butcher in Aldgate named Joseph, is probably withholding information of the utmost importance. I must find this man. Perhaps you can help me.
But there are dozens of Jewish butchers around Aldgate, half of which must be called Joseph. And you know, Mr. Holmes, we Jews prefer to remain in the background of this murderer business, this Jack the Ripper thing. All of London is pointing their fingers at us saying, it's a Jew who disemboweled these women. Our community is in great peril, you know. There was the business with Lipski and Leather Apron. I will see what I can do, but I don't promise anything.
I'd be extremely grateful to you.
Goodbye.
Very well. We may meet again, Mr. Solomonovich.
You are most welcome, Mr. Holmes.
I've paced up and down Whitechapel enough. I should return to Baker Street in order to reflect on the new facts that I have discovered.
Let's go to Baker Street. Let's poke myself in the face with a pipe. That'll help me think.
Hello, Holmes.
Good day, Watson.
Listen, Holmes, I know I should have got here sooner to give you a report on my research, but this case has led me to neglect my patients and my wife more than I care to admit. I've been able to sort things out over the last few days, and now I am ready to pursue this investigation.
You don't have to justify yourself, Watson. Whilst I do tolerate you as an observer, and despite your occasional help with more menial tasks, may I remind you that you are by no means an indispensable part of this case.
Oh, you tolerate me as an observer, do you? Oh, you're too much, Holmes. Well, Mr. Detective, despite my absence, I have been working on this case, putting my relationship on the line in the process. And I happen to have a confidential letter that only passed from one lord's hand to another. What it contains is extremely serious and concerns Dr. Tumblety and his collection of uteri.
Let me see that.
I don't like that. Oh, I tolerate you as an observer. Like, no. Like, I know it's just television, but I don't think it's in the book. But there's a scene in the Jeremy Brett series where he kind of asks, and Watson's like, well, he starts talking about his practice, and I'm just like, well, if you've got other things to do, not as a kind of, well, if you've got better things to do, you don't have to do it. You don't have to come with me. It's a kind of, I'm kind of, well, if you can't come, don't come, but I'll be sad. I'm like, because they get on. They're meant to be friends. Right. My lord, be hereby assured of my entire collaboration in the affair, to which I must reply. No one will be able to cast opprobrium on our institution or ourselves. Our eminent colleagues support our policies, and they won't cooperate with the police as long as the higher interests that we serve aren't menaced. As you mentioned, we must avoid having to explain to the uncultured masses the exigencies of medical research. A general crisis of confidence will result in an inevitable amalgamation that the press would hasten to create between this and the hideous murders committed in the East End. To this end, I tactfully evoked the rumour that you mentioned in your letter when I met with my colleagues. It turned out to have grounds, and these are the specifics that I was able to obtain. 18 months thence, an American doctor in London did, in fact, contact certain hospitals. His approach was aimed at getting stocks of feminine genitalia, particularly uteri. It was motivated initially by the finalization of his research and of its publication. The doctor in question wanted to include a uterus specimen freshly conserved in formalin with each of the research dissertations sent to each of the colleagues. Large quantity was thus necessary, and this doctor proposed to buy each of the uteri for £20 each. Between you and I, my lord, who knows what strange consequences would have followed these demands of the American doctor? The rumour of these unusual commissions made the tour of the hospitals in question at the time, and has spread to others since. Simple day labourers employed in our organisations considered that the gain of £20 could justify theft. Perhaps worse. The identity of the doctor is unknown to me, but based on the recall of one of my colleagues, this man had the most impressive references. But after a bit of research that I didn't find the existence of any publication with an actual correlation on this or the other side of the Atlantic. The man left London shortly after his pitch, it would seem. I cannot help but think that he has perhaps returned to London and has found someone who might furnish him with what he's looking for.
Excellent. This American could turn out to be of great use to use.
That's right. And that's not all. I did some research and finally found an illness that affects the genitalia and can, in certain cases, cause facial symptoms resembling the mutilations seen on the last victim. It is called, would you believe?
Syphilis and the emaciation that can be seen in affected children. I have known that for days, Watson.
Really?
Listen, now you're already here, Watson, we may as well continue the investigation. Do you remember the map on which we established the area in which our killer lives? I think we should continue our study.
The map.
Well, I discovered the case of another murder before that of Bucks Row. It happened in George Yard. We shall put it on the map in order to see if it corresponds to our area of research. We must place the murder of Martha Tabram in George Yard on the map.
So that's there, is it? Yes.
That is where Martha Tabram's murder took place. There's no point going there. I already have all the information we need on that matter. You see, this murder took place in the area in which our killer lives, his safe zone. Nonetheless, there are two major differences between the murder of this Martha Tabram and that of Polly Nichols. Firstly, the blows inflicted are not the same.
And the second difference?
It follows on from a doctor's opinion. He claims two weapons might have been used, and if there is one group of people we absolutely must not trust in this business, it's doctors. Don't you agree, Watson?
Watch it, Holmes.
Tabram's murder took place in an area where the murderer, whose cowardice is clear, was able to make a quick getaway, that is to say, near his home. For his second murder, he would have wanted to go further afield, so the police would not link these two cases. And as for the other murders, seeing the ineffectiveness of his last one, he headed in different directions to kill his victims while still staying in the vicinity and without going any further than necessary, and all the while planning his escape.